Isn't that the natural reaction when you're uncomfortable? Just wishing the pain would stop, wishing the circumstance would end, wishing everything would just go a different direction, but we don't realize it's exactly what we need. It's actually the only thing that's saving us right now from what? From ourselves. From becoming that thing that in your own mind you think it's impossible for me to ever become that. But if that was really the case, why are we here? I want to share a revelation that I got from a movie that I was watching. And I think going through it and some of the revelation is actually going to really encourage you guys to just this process or journey of self knowledge that we're on, where instead of looking outward, like we talked about at Love Feast on Thursday, that I said my repentance prayer and confessing Jesus as my Savior, but I'm not the light of the world. It's not my job to save everybody in the world and just do all this stuff. Jesus is the light of the world. So I'm trying to be his body and find out what is he asking of me? What does it look like to serve him? And I think we've all found out, at least when our heart is in a really humble place, the things that he's asking us to do to serve him is less for those that we're serving and more for our own process. Like we're working in this cafe or we serve at the church or Phil and Colleen's. There's so many different ways that we just give of ourselves to not be self absorbed, not think about our own feelings or how things affect us. And it's really easy to get lost in the project. And we constantly are doing services and messages and exercises to help everybody remember this is about me. It's not about the food I'm prepping. It's not about the dishes I'm cleaning, the garbages I'm emptying. This is about my own process because I need this. I need to be able to have this system. But how many of you guys forget that from time to time? You get so caught up in, I got to just finish this project or I got to finish prepping this thing and then we'll move on to the next thing. And you think that it's about making the garlic bread or prepping the coleslaw or making cornbread or cleaning whatever. But it's not. It's actually about something really intimate that God is doing inside of our own hearts. You know what happens the second that we forget that? We start to become proud. We forget what we're really working on inside of ourselves. And it becomes more about performance or just doing the right things on the outside rather than really checking your heart motives. So we're constantly talking about, what's your testimony for the week? What was God talking to you about this week? What kind of work was he doing inside of your own heart? And we have a lot of mechanisms we put in place, whether it's the counseling system that we have or the love feast that we do, even just the act of doing communion. I mean, that's the point, isn't it? Let's remember what Jesus did for us so we can stay humble, realize that I really have a need for him. And when I break free or I'm not attached to the vine, what happens? I become my old self pretty quickly. And there's a image that I've had in my mind all week is you have the farmer who is taking care of a field. And what happens if, say, 1 week goes by and he doesn't tend to the field, and then another week and another week. What happens? Crops start to die, and does something else come and take their place? Weeds start growing. And I realize there's something that I think we don't realize, because when we're looking at ourselves and we're taking in fresh wind, we're trying to grow and change, we're doing the weeding, right? We're picking out all the old stuff, but what we don't look at sometimes is what kind of person would we be right now if we didn't do that. What we don't realize is how much we're maintaining our own spiritual process. And for you in the week, it might look like something simple, whether it's serving, and rather than just doing your own thing, indulging your own feelings, you're doing an act to get outside of yourself, and it's taking care of that field. Obviously, in reference to what we're talking about, that's your soul, your garden, your process that God is bringing you through. But what happens when you stop? What kind of person do you think you would be if you stopped going into your garden and really looking at yourself? Because you look at your life and what you have right now, whether that's the quality of peace that you have, or some of the harmony that's in your life, or the relationships that are healthy and not destructive. What do you think would happen if that system was removed? You stopped looking at yourself. You stopped going out there and pulling the weeds. You stopped taking on self-knowledge. Maybe some of those thorns in your side that you say, man, if only this wasn't in my life right now, then I would be free to do this or do that, or be more comfortable, or not have so much challenges, or get a little more sleep, or whatever that circumstance is. And getting into this movie that I watched, it really made me think about this a lot, because I'm going to tell you about the movie in a way that you'll really have no idea what movie I'm talking about. I don't think it matters. I could tell you later. It's actually a really good movie. But in the movie, you have this guy, and you can tell he was in the movie he was a scientist. You can tell he was a little discontent with his life. He had really big dreams and wanted to have his own lab or do his own research or something like that. And then this event happened in his life, like a monumental event. And in the movie, he goes 30 years in the future, because something's happening and he's needed in the future to help with a really important task. And you take an event like that, and that's a problem, right? I mean, he has a daughter, he has a wife, and he's leaving his whole life behind to do this thing that is sacrificial. Most of the people who are called to do what he's doing, most of them die. And it was a pretty big sacrifice that he's going and doing this. So you go through this movie, and you could say he's the hero, the one who's, jumping left and right to save everybody and help everybody. And as he's in the future, he meets his daughter. So he's got this 8-year-old girl, and then go 30 years ahead. Now she's like almost 40 years old or so, and he meets her. And when he meets her, she wants to have nothing to do with him. And he's totally shocked, because he absolutely loves his daughter, and they had an amazing relationship. Like, she just absolutely loved him, and now all of a sudden, like, she won't talk to him. And although he went 30 years in the future, he doesn't really know, like, what happened. And as things start to unfold in the movie, his daughter talks to him and says, I need to just tell you that 5 years after you left, you started to become so discontent with your life that you ended up getting a divorce. And then after your divorce, you started to get into other things and you just like left our whole family. And he was so shocked when he heard this news because he just kept saying, I would never ever leave my family. I would never divide from my wife. I would never abandon my kids. And it's like she just wanted to have nothing to do with him. I mean, imagine encountering somebody that you love just more than anything in the world, and then you find out that you just totally betrayed them. It'd be kind of hard to deal with, wouldn't it? And it's like he just couldn't conceive of this person that he became, that he was so divided that he was on his own. And I thought it was an incredible picture because now she's connecting with his old, self before all that time period. And she said, I'm so glad to see you like this and not see you as the person that you eventually became. And it started with something just really simple, like not being content, just being unhappy with his current work situation. But eventually that led to one thing, that led to another thing, that led to another thing, that he was totally divided. And the movie ends up showing you that he ended up becoming absolutely everything to his family that his dad became to him. That he didn't know his dad growing up because what did his dad do? Left the family, became a loner, was abusive. All these really terrible things that he said he would never ever become, but he found out that that's exactly what he did become. You guys see where I'm going with this? It was not a deep movie. It was just an action, entertaining kind of movie, but it just really struck me. Like when we look at our lives right now, do we really realize how important it is that you pulled that one weed this week? Just that one weed. Not the big overhaul, not the cleaning of the whole garden, but just that one little weed. Because it builds up and it builds up and it builds up until finally things are just totally out of control. And I just want you guys to think for a minute, what kind of person do you think you would be right now if it wasn't for Love Feast, sharing a testimony? If it wasn't for some of those things that you have in your life that make you uncomfortable? Or having a friend who isn't afraid to speak the truth and show you some things about yourself that are really hard to see and recognize. I think it's easy to project forward thinking that you're just going to be the same person that you are right now. Just like he did. You don't ever think that way? Not really realizing how much what we do and the way we serve, the way we try and look at ourselves and not just look for consolation or just looking for ways that we can feel good. So that's a lot of what church has become. This is about how I feel and making me feel good and giving me that warm and fuzzy and fixing all my problems. But no, we actually need those problems. And you may not look at your week and say, wow, this was a big monumental thing. I saw a simple truth about myself, or I made a simple change, but a small change over a long period of time has a huge effect on the kind of person that you become. And I think we look at our sin nature sometimes and really underestimate the kind of person that we can become if we're not constantly going on this journey of looking at ourselves. He was totally shocked. I would never, ever do that to my family. I would never leave them. I would never divide. I would never respond in the way, like he couldn't believe it, as if it was untrue. But it is true. We're capable of all those things. And it's not like our sin nature is going away. If you haven't been committed to yourself in your own spiritual process in the ways that you guys have been, and however long you've been working on yourself, who do you think you would be right now? So I think sometimes we act as if maybe the integrity we have, the relationships we have, the decisions, it's like, well, that's just us, but not really. I've shared with you guys before in the past that I had a dream that I just barely made it. That there was a small little window of opportunity for me to step outside the generational influences that impact my family to go a different path. And I feel like I have a pretty good idea of exactly the person that I would be right now if I just made a different choice. Ended up pursuing some different things. The quality of my life would just be totally different. And just wondering, do you guys realize that? You realize the benefit of looking at yourself? I think that if we did, when that circumstance comes, maybe you'd be a little less likely to just wish it went away. Isn't that the natural reaction when you're uncomfortable, just wishing the pain would stop, wishing the circumstance would end, wishing everything would just go a different direction, but we don't realize it's exactly what we need. It's actually the only thing that's saving us right now from what? From ourselves. From becoming that thing that in your own mind you think it's impossible for me to ever become that. But if that was really the case, why are we here? Aren't we professing ourselves as Christians because we've decided that without him I'd be lost? The kind of person that I would be right now if I wasn't on this journey of looking at myself, going on a pilgrimage, that it's not so much about the good that I do on the outside, but how my circumstances are accomplishing something on the inside. Just one little weed this week. But that little tiny weed that maybe wasn't a big deal, maybe that moment where something really stung, maybe somebody judged you, and you had to decide, am I going to defend myself or let it just be between them and God because your conscience was not telling you to bring it up? Letting it go, letting it sting was pulling that weed up so it didn't grow to become something absolutely huge a couple years down the road. Some of us a couple weeks down the road. You guys see the picture? I just thought this movie really was, it was really sobering for me in that way, even though I don't think was the intention of the director to get this message across, but I thought about it like, who would I be right now? What would my life look like if I went back and just made a couple different decisions, made a couple life choices, or went the direction that would make things more comfortable or more fitting to how you're supposed to live in the world? What if I tried to escape from some of those circumstances that God put? Who would I be right now? How would I be reacting to those around me? Left unchecked, this garden of ours becomes so unmanageable that it's very difficult to come back from. If you look at it that way, should one lead us to feeling really grateful inside for our trials, for some of the circumstances in our life that like force us to make a decision sometimes? Maybe it's a circumstance that is really hard and is really painful, but it forces you into a corner to say, are you going to be humble? Are you going to be proud? A decision that you wouldn't make normally, but because you have this circumstance, it's forcing you to make it. It's exposing it. It's bringing it to the forefront. So you have to choose, do I want to pull out this weed or do I want to water it? Give expression to it. If you look at it like that and see the big picture of what is actually happening, or you could even say what's being held at bay. Remember how there's that scripture that talks about how it's in James that his grace is always there to meet the need of our evil tendencies. See, you go through life and his grace is there to meet the needs, but you don't think about what would it be like to me to be me right now if the grace wasn't there meeting those evil tendencies. If I stopped taking the humble road and just lived out my life the way everybody in the world lives out their life, just for their own pleasure, their own good, their own comfort, even doing well-meaning good things, but having an agenda that was really self-focused rather than God-focused, who would you become? What kind of weeds do you think would be in your garden right now? How many relationships do you have right now that you just absolutely love and you tell yourself, I would do anything to make sure I'm not divided or I never hurt those around me that I love? Yet it's very likely it's exactly what we would have done, unchecked. I think it's a really sobering picture, but it should also cause us to be really grateful and do one other thing too. You know what that is? Actually use the system that we have, which means you show up to an event. It's not about giving a testimony just for the sake of giving a testimony, but doing it so you can pull that weed out, so you can continue on the path, seeking out your own personal growth and development, because you don't want to become that person. And you realize that Jesus' grace is there. He's meeting the need for me to become something different. Not being so captivated by the lights and the entertainment that the world has to offer. I thought it was really inspiring to look at, because I know what it's like to be me every day, just like you know what you go through every day, which means it's really, really hard to relate to what it would be like to be me unchecked. Like, it's hard to relate to. Except for those moments when we get off track and start to taste what it's like to be us and say, oh gosh, I need to get back on the wagon here. Because this is not turning out well for me. It's just a taste. That's all it is. It's just a little taste of the kind of person that we become. And as you get older, those things get more developed inside. Remember, we did the message that our sin nature is like that snake, that python that just wraps around you. And every single time you take a breath, it's like trying to wrap a little tighter and a little tighter and a little tighter. And all of humanity is just totally doomed against it. It's just reality. I mean, that is the case. And as everybody gives themselves over a little bit more and a little bit more to their own sin nature, their hearts get a little darker and a little darker till people end up retiring. They end up looking back on their lives, and it's like they're just bitter and they're angry and don't really have relationships with people. It's a lot of maybe we golf together or we do some sort of like thing together, but end up just being like a loner inside of your own heart because you just can't relate to anything but your own heart. It just progresses to this place that's really dark. We've all met somebody like that it's just like, are you ever happy? Like, are you ever content? You ever think about anything outside of your own feelings and how things affect you? It gets worse and worse and worse as more time goes on. And the only thing that holds it at bay is Jesus. Thank God for that. So all these steps that we take, you guys would have so much more free time if you stop coming here. Wouldn't you? You get a lot more dusting done. But then you start to get bored. Think about all the other things that you got to do that you don't really got to do. And then you got to find a hobby. And you have to just become totally absorbed in the next thing because you're bored. And it leads down a really dark path, even for those who get involved in seemingly innocent things. Left unchecked, that garden just gets really unmanageable, gets out of control. Becomes really difficult to relate to anything outside of yourself. You're just so locked in to your own feelings that it's just a black hole that you're stuck in. And you don't realize how important that decision was at that one event just to give a testimony that caused you to be humble rather than just keeping it to you. Don't know how important that was. You don't know what that was going to cause you to become in the future if you didn't take care of it. If you didn't take it seriously. Or you didn't take your Tuesday nights to help and do something that serves the greater good rather than just serving yourself. Left unchecked, what did that become? We have a lot to really be grateful for and a lot to appreciate, and I think we got to be really careful to just wish things look different sometimes. And not be wise to the fact that the circumstances we're in not just because no one in the world could ever do the job that we're doing. The people in the world would totally be lost if it wasn't for us doing what we do. It's funny, but that's how we think. I just gotta finish this. I just gotta do. It's nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with you and whatever our destinies are. I'm totally convinced is just simply what we need to go through to heal. And he picks a different destiny that it has exactly totally tailor made to your process, your experiences, your traumas, your generational influences that you have to be purged from, which means that whatever position we have doesn't make one person better than the other. It just is exactly what you have to go through so you can grow and you can be a spiritual person, rather than letting your garden get totally out of control. And realize just that little weed, how important it was. That moment where you sat down with a friend and just let yourself be vulnerable of what was really going on inside of your heart so you could be free and be something different. I really don't think we realize how important it is what we do, nor do we always take advantage of it to the fullness that we could be taking advantage of it. To stop that python snake from wrapping us a little tighter and a little tighter till we just can't see outside of our own self, get lost inside. We start to lose ourselves when we forget that this is just really about me and my own process, because there's something working me constantly at work, trying to divide me from the kind of person that I really want to be, or the kind of person I think I'm incapable of becoming. But we're not incapable of becoming that person. So we put mechanisms in place to stop us from becoming that person. Thank God that Jesus came, gave us his spirit, and that his grace rises up inside of us to cause us to be something different. We got to cling to that grace and really value it, appreciate how it's changing us from the inside out to be a different kind of person.